First, though, some people say that if there really are captured UFOs, the authorities couldn't keep it a secret. Somehow word would get out. Well, maybe that's what we're about to see. Information that's leaked out. Area 51 is the most secret military base in the world. Many people have seen strange lights performing maneuvers above it. And recently, President Clinton placed a huge exclusion zone around it, so it's now impossible to view the base. What are the dark secrets that lie inside Area 51? The American government denies that this place even exists. But this Russian satellite photo tells a different story, showing huge hangars and an enormous runway. The place is Area 51 in the Nevada desert. It was built in the 1950s to test top-secret aircraft. The stealth fighter was developed here. Security's tight inside and outside the base. American scientist Robert Lazar claimed he worked in the highest security section called S4.
The security was unbelievably oppressive. There was a security guard everywhere following you all the time. There was never any free discussion allowed, which is the basis of science.
Recently, Lazar caused a sensation when he revealed that he'd been ordered to investigate the propulsion systems of captured alien spacecraft.
My work involved the back engineering of an extraterrestrial craft, specifically the propulsion and power source. The UFOs are very typical. As far as a typical UFO is, it's two inverted dishes, two inverted pie plates, if you wish, and with a hump on the top. Metallic looking, no wings, no fins, no visible propulsion source. Inside they're very sparse. If you come in the main entryway, you'll see 3 seats, the central reactor and waveguide that goes to the ceiling, the 3 gravity amplifiers surrounding it, and you'll really see just about nothing else.
The authorities immediately denied his claims, and now he says they've tried to erase his identity from all official records. George Knapp is a well-respected investigative reporter with KLAS-TV. He broke the story, including the claim that Lazar worked at Los Alamos in New Mexico, where the atomic bomb was developed.
The lab denied any knowledge of his existence, denied that he'd ever worked there. We came back with a phone book from the lab that shows Bob's name in it, that he was in fact there. They still denied any knowledge that he had ever worked there. I asked Bob if he'd be willing to take a polygraph test, and he didn't hesitate. The polygraph examiner, after conducting a series of 4 different tests, concluded that Bob is telling the truth about what he saw out there, about working at the base, about seeing the flying saucers, about working on anti-gravity propulsion systems, telling the truth. I had a former employee quiz him for a period of 2 hours about simple things, not where are the flying saucers stored, but where's the cafeteria? How do you pay for your meal? What's it look like inside? Those sorts of things, and that employee is convinced that Bob really was out there.
Were you threatened?
I was threatened, and my wife's life was threatened also.
And why do you think that those threats were not carried out?
Probably because that I went public.
And basically, we were the first ones to see the object. And basically what happened is we didn't go straight up the hill, because basically this thing went up the hill and then off into the side of the ravine of the ridge. This is about a 200-foot ridge at least. Solid granite. I mean, it's rock. I don't know if it's granite. It was buried in the side of the cliff. But anyway, we didn't go straight up. We went on to the left and walked up to the top of the ridge. And that's when we saw the craft. This is a huge ship, and you know, I used to be into sci-fi movies when I was a kid, but this is nothing like I'd ever seen. And when I first saw it, you know, I was scared. It scared the heck out of me. You know, I didn't know what to do, and it was just, it was really confusing. So we all climbed down, and it was buried for about a 45-degree angle into the side of the the cliff there, the ridge. And I mean, this is a steep cliff. I mean, it's straight up and down, and it was dripping this syrup-like syrup viscosity, this liquid. It was everywhere, all down. Everywhere when we went down there, because there were plants and everything. And it was weird. It was a purplish green color, and it was a greenish purple, and it kind of like fluctuated. Like you couldn't really, when you'd look at it one time, then you'd look at it again, and it would it's almost like it. I don't know if it was like alive and it was just changing, but every time you looked at it, you saw a different shade of greenish purple. It was strange. there was one light on it that slowly went around, and the machine, I could hear it. I could hear, I guess because it was still functioning, and it had like a hum to it, like a really bass, like say if you unplugged an amp from a guitar, that kind of, it was really, it was really deep, and it kind of fluctuated, and then finally it just cut off, and everything just seemed to stop, except the colors and the shades, and it was still that way. When I was looking at the craft, it was buried, so I could see the back of it, and there were these large vents. Well, they look like vents, sort of like a fish gill on the back. I couldn't see around the other side, and I guess I'm assuming it was the same way on the other side. That looked like, I don't know, that could have been used for propulsion. I'm not sure. Again, this liquid that had come out of the ship it got on my camis, and it discolored them and ate them almost like acid. And then it ate some of the skin off, the hair off my arms. And and I didn't know that until later on. But basically, when I was down there with the ship, there was 3 holes. And I guess I'd assume that they were hatches, but there's no way to tell. They were not flush with the with the body, the main body of the craft. They're, I don't know, a few inches below. I knew there was one on top because you could slightly see it. I don't know about the other side, but there was another hatch, the same width and diameter or whatever of the top hatch, and it was kind of crooked to the side, and it was half open. And I didn't see any lights or anything coming out of it, but I felt this presence that it's real strange. I guess it was almost like, I think I told Leslie this, I thought the creatures they conned me, and it was like weird, and I think they were trying to communicate with me, like, I guess telepathically. It's really weird, and I don't believe in any of that stuff, but anyway, it was, I could hear, like, and it was terrible because it kept going, and then it still comes and goes. It's like basically sitting in your car and turning on like an AM station that's not, it's just white noise, and it's turning it up really high. And that's what I heard when I first got in there. This is pretty crude 2-dimensional drawing, but this is jungle here, and this was the craft, and it was embedded in the rock like this, and I'm not sure if this tapered off or how it went, but these right here are the hatches, these 2 objects here. This one was the one that was half open, and you could see into it, but I mean, it was just black. It was like looking into a closet. 10 meters in width and about 20 meters in length. I'm just not sure. That's just an estimate from what I remember. But it was huge. I mean, it was big, man. And it was shaped like almost like between an egg and like a teardrop almost. It looked really aerodynamic, at least in the shape. But the closer I was close enough to take out detail on it, that it was not just smooth. There was bumps and notches and things in it. It was really organic. It was almost like art. That's really how you would. It didn't look like something that somebody made in a shop. It didn't have that clunkiness or that tin can kind of deal. It was more of art. I would say. It looked to be that it could have been handmade, but out of what and what materials, I don't know. Definitely nothing like titanium. It wasn't. See, this is the whole thing. It looked metal, but it didn't have any reflection on it, man. I mean, the sun's coming down, and if you got something made of metal, regardless of it, I mean, maybe if it's subdued with paint and it's got a cami sheen on it, you're not going to see any reflection. But I could see the different shades of the craft. They didn't shine. It just like it was. It didn't reflect anything, and I guarantee if I'd have thrown like a flashlight on it, wouldn't have reflected it.
My name is Eric Tabor. I work for I did work for a U.S. aerospace company on different projects. I had a security clearance for the past 13 years. Everything that I've worked on and seen is not anywhere close to the same level of technology as the Tic Tac, for example, or other things that have been cited that are quite exotic and can move in ways that defy physics. Some of the things I've worked on I cannot and will never talk about. As a patriotic American, I would never divulge classified information.
And you have some direct experience of this with your family. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I moved to the West Coast in 2012. No family west of the Mississippi. My grandmother was nice enough to let me know that I had a great uncle named Sam Urquhart. He told me that he worked at Area 51 from 1997 until 2014. Stayed working there as EG&G evolved through a merger with Raytheon, I believe, into the company known as JT3, and then retired in 2014 as JT3 transitioned into JT4. He said, when I first got there in 1997, I had a personal conversation with a senior EG&G engineer whose group was tasked with trying to reverse engineer, figure out an object that was brought there by some CIA people in the 1980s, and it was supposedly found just resting in a remote desert location, fully intact. And the senior EG&G engineer described to my great uncle that it was egg-shaped, about the size of a SUV, smooth and seamless, metallic looking, silverish gray in color, no control surfaces, no flaps, no inlet, no exhaust. It showed up on X-ray as a solid object. They tried to penetrate the hull, try to open it. They couldn't. They said that they were able to take some very small samples of the material. I'm not an expert in chemistry, but I guess the isotope ratio or the mixture of elements, they concluded it was not made on Earth. It's my personal belief that technical data, information should remain classified, and these objects shouldn't be paraded around for everyone to see. Although I know humanity wants to see this and know this information. The problem is other countries have these objects as well. I conducted a 45-minute phone interview directly with Aero, told them everything that I'm sharing right now. Shortly after the interview, they forwarded me a memorandum of record to sign and date initial, and that's going to be compiled with all the other data they're collecting and to a historical record that's going to go to Congress sometime next year. My dealings with Aero, they were very professional. They were very interested in what I had to say. They never said, don't talk about this. They never were threatening. They never were demeaning.
What would you say the value is of this information? You know, on the one hand, you are giving a story that's second or third hand. This is retold by your great uncle who's now passed away. On the other hand, this could give us a very interesting lead to potential alien craft that's hidden at Area 51.
I think the public wants answers, and they want answers from Aero now, but there's a lot of people contacting them like I have, and they're trying to get not just some data, but as much as they can, compile it and give it to Congress for them to disseminate. It's not going to be compiled and just given to a news organization. So people, I think, need a little more patience. Skepticism is good and holding people's feet to the fire, but at the same time, you got to let investigations take some time. Disclosure has to be done carefully. It has to be done carefully. We don't want our enemies to know everything that we've got.
Do you have a message for any other potential whistleblowers or people with information about potential crash retrievals or UFOs? What should they do?
Never want to play your full hand. But I do believe wholeheartedly that humanity deserves to know the truth if we have recovered these non-human objects or crafts, which 100% I believe we have.
If mining and slave trade is part of, this galactic commerce, where does our Navy fit into this and our space program?
Well, that's a good question, especially in view of recent events since Bill died, when we've officially announced there is a Space Force. It even has its own flag. But my feeling is that Bill's view was related to the Solar Warden thing, which started with the Navy, but it's not clear to me at the time that he died it was only the Navy that was controlling that, because I think that the Solar Warden program was really representing the good guys trying to make sure that certain kinds of alien craft were not intruding into our sphere of influence.
So they weren't part of that slave trade, is what he told you?
No, they're not. They were trying to protect us against evil aliens, and promote harmony amongst friendly aliens.
Right. Well, we do have a clip from William Tompkins about this galactic slave trade. So let's take a look at it.
Okay. It's very strange that this has been going on, that the same structure of a medieval country, kings, queens, princesses, all of the top people, agreed with maybe France's or Spain's group, and they became the elite. They became the control of the population in their countries and were never allowing the people a real life, never allowing them to participate in many of the upper things. And many of them were actually slaves. So the big slavery business out there is a big business. It's a major business today, a massive business. Anything that you want to manufacture, anything that you want to farm, anything that you want to build, it's all done with slave people. And in Germany, Germany had massive underground facilities that were all slaves. And even to the extent that when the decision was made before the war ended that they were going to continue all of their extraterrestrial developments on UFOs and on every weapon system that they were building, they took the production facilities to Antarctica, but they also brought the slaves with them. So now they're slaves underneath the ground and they still are today in Antarctica. But slave business out there is a big business. And this is happening today. It's not something that happened 100 years ago. This has been going on a long time. And that needs to be fixed. And there's all kinds of slavery. There's sexual slavery, unbelievably. There's many different classes of people that are abducted for slavery, sexual slavery. They want the tops and the smartest. And because they're worth more. They have, I think, 4 or 5 different levels of people that they abduct. They abduct top medical research people. They abduct the corporate levels, and they abduct the most brilliant levels, and then they go down through 3 levels, and that says where they get sectioned off. Everybody gets to 2 planets, and then it's decided where they're going to be sent to. And but it's a massive business. It's been going on for years, and we can't identify where these people have gone. And just like normal abductions, we don't know where they went. But it's because most of them don't come back. We're only hearing from the few that came back.
Shocking, to say the least. But where did he extract his intelligence from for this?
That is a superior question because it's the question he never answered to me. You know, he talked about slavery in very global terms and to some extent specific terms, the different kinds of slavery, but he never talked about the questions I wanted answered, and that is, what were his sources of information for this, and why was he so confident that these numbers were valid? And I mean, the specifics of how he knew what he claimed to know were missing in our conversations. So I was very informed to see his articulate presentation, but very frustrated to realize that the questions I want answered, which was what's the process involved to make this slavery happen, those questions were not answered.
The U.S. Navy is not doing this. They're protecting us. Yet here on planet Earth, we have people, that he's claiming slavery down in Antarctica right now. So why are they not being protected?
Well, we don't have control over what the reptilians and the Nazis are doing in Antarctica.
Well, there's slavery obviously happening on our planet. The question is it the humans? Is it the Earthlings here, conducting that? Is it another, extraterrestrial force?
Really, Bill and I didn't speculate about that much. I do know, though, that there have been some times when he's been asked questions, not by me, but by another interviewer, where his response was, I can't tell you about that. And so always in my mind, there's been a question of, well, what is it that when he was told by Admiral Webster to Bill, tell it all, what is it that he now, or when before he died, felt he could not speak of? And I have never figured out. I thought about 3 or 4 possibilities. One of them might have been the details associated with.
Area 51 is considered the ultimate top-secret facility that, according to UFO investigators, is home to extraterrestrial technology. But there's another facility even more secretive than Area 51. It is the Dugway Proving Ground in Utah, a remote testing military facility that is sometimes referred to as Area 52. Although on paper this U.S. Army facility was established to test biological and chemical weapons, UFO watchers have witnessed strange phenomena at this military site for over 10 years. This has further cemented their belief that the government is reverse engineering alien crafts and using its advanced technology to create terrifying weapons. Get ready as we reveal a first-hand witness account that will blow your mind. Dugway Proving Ground DPG was established in 1942 after the 1941 attack on Pearl Harbor. Its purpose was to provide a secure base for the military to test chemical and biological munitions, essentially offensive weaponry. However, by 1970, its mission transitioned to work solely on defense. Over the years, the Proving Ground, which is also called an installation, has been expanded several times. It currently covers 1,200 square miles, making it bigger than the state of Rhode Island. But there's much more to the Dugway Proving Ground than the military cares to admit. Many ufologists and alien hunters believe DPG should be called the new Area 51, as it holds mysterious secrets that hint at extraterrestrial technology. One of the advocates is Dane Rosenfield, director of the Utah UFO Hunters. Dave has been researching and observing Dugway since the early 2000s and has seen things we can only imagine. It all began when he started receiving correspondence from people living around Dugway, claiming they had seen UFOs and other phenomena that were hard to explain. These UFOs demonstrated extraordinary technology, from reaching a dead stop in seconds to flying at unimaginable speeds. Witnesses had seen a lot of unusual activity around the skies above Dugway. Dave believes that much of this is linked to Area 51. When the Nevada military base became the center of public attention following Bob Lazar's claims, quick decisions had to be taken to secure the facility and the technology contained within. Therefore, much of the extraterrestrial material that was previously stored in Nevada, Area 51, was moved to Dugway, Utah. It was, after all, one of the most isolated areas in the U.S., and this remoteness could easily guarantee improved secrecy. Once this material reached Dugway, the U.S. military began reverse engineering UFOs and using their advanced technology to build extraordinary defense machines. But these are not simply assumptions. Dave has witnessed these high-tech crafts with his own eyes. One day he was on a railway track when he saw a triangular object in the sky. It was fairly large and black in color. It was moving toward him at one point, but suddenly it changed course and sped away. It was unlike anything he had seen before. The way it hovered low in the sky, maneuvered, and changed directions abruptly displayed technology much more advanced than the U.S. military claims to have. Unfortunately, it all happened so quickly that Dave never got a chance to take a picture of the mysterious craft, so we'll just have to take his word for it. Once, Dave posted something on his website, after which a few intimidating individuals turned up at his home, confronting him to delete the post or get charged with treason. They even pressured him to disclose the source who passed him that information, which he flatly refused. While we cannot discuss what that post contained, one thing is for sure. The U.S. military was willing to go to great lengths to safeguard Dugway's secrets. Dave is confident that the U.S. military is working on aircraft that defy gravity, can reach unimaginable speeds, and manipulate air and land in ways that baffle our senses. But this cutting-edge technology isn't a human invention. Dave believes that the U.S. military has alien spacecraft in their labs and is reverse engineering them to create their own aircraft. What's more, he is sure that these extraordinary crafts are being tested currently in Dugway Proving Ground, far away from the public's prying eyes. Let us remind you that his statements are based on actual evidence that he has captured himself. Have a look at this. The bizarre lights are not flares since they are moving and changing positions. As Dave observed the lights, he watched them form a line and move in formation until they made a controlled turn. If you thought that was unusual, wait until you see the photographs Dave produced, which may be the most compelling evidence of it all. The pictures were taken in 2015. Dave was camping with his girlfriend south to the military installation when they saw a bright beam of light shooting out. It was frightening because they could also almost smell static electricity from where they were watching the beam. Here's the first time it fired, and here's the second time he caught the beam of light on camera. Dave could see the light passing through the clouds, probably going as far as outer space. As you can see, there are small blue dots in the photograph surrounding the light. Could these small blue dots be UFOs of extraterrestrial origin who saw the light from outside and came down to monitor how their technology was being used on Earth? Because this light beam definitely looks like an offensive weapon. Could this be a weapon of mass destruction back-engineered from downed UFOs? Another peculiar observation that Dave made at the military installation left him puzzled. The Dugway Range has so much dust around it that it's impossible for a vehicle to move on the ground without creating a dust trail. Once, Dave saw a dust trail on the range, but when he zoomed in to see the vehicle creating it, he could see nothing there. He was floored. He could clearly see multiple dust trails right in front of his eyes, but no vehicles to justify it. Could the U.S. military be developing a cloaking technique that many UFO observers have reported over the years? Interestingly, Dave isn't the only one to see extraordinary happening around Dugway. A former police officer on the Gooshoot Reservation reported seeing a flying saucer in the night sky when he was traveling a desolate road in the West Desert. But when he flashed a light beam on the UFO, it reacted by speeding up and disappearing over a mountain range. It was out of sight in seconds, moving faster than any known plane can travel. What made matters even more intriguing was the two fighter jets he saw following the flying saucer's flight path just minutes later. Is the U.S. military really testing alien technology at Dugway Proving Ground? Believe it or not, there are many experts like Davin Rosenfield who have made these claims over the years. One of them is Dr. Stephen Greer, who gave up a $400,000 per year career in medicine to make contact with extraterrestrials and expose a massive cover-up by the U.S. government dating back to the late 1940s. Greer is confident that a UFO crashed in Roswell, Mexico, 1947, and the remains of the ETs, as well as their flying saucer and medical scanning technology, were confiscated by the U.S. military. According to Greer, the U.S. secret black box program has been working in conjunction with Lockheed Martin to reverse engineer the alien technology since then. Did you know that former CEO of Lockheed Martin, Dr. Ben Rich, made a startling confession on his deathbed? He said, "We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do." Dave's observations seem more believable now, don't they? If the U.S. Army is developing alien technology and testing it, they would need a massive amount of security to keep these operations private. And that's where Dugway Proving Ground comes to the rescue. Dugway's airfield is surrounded on three sides by mountains. Anyone caught attempting to climb these mountains with a vehicle and approach Dugway's southern border will be stopped by ground patrol or Apache helicopters. This would ensure the black box program remains safe, secure, and private. What do you think about Dave Rosenfield's claims? Is Dugway Proving Ground testing the most advanced alien reverse-engineered technology? Tell us your opinions in the comments below. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and press the notification bell for more videos.
Tonight,
Show and tell, take one.
for the first time, a former senior military intelligence officer comes forward to say what we've only imagined is true. You are saying to the human race, for the first time, we are not alone.
We're definitely not alone.
Claims that our government has proof of alien life. We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number. Some are landed, some are crashed.
Allegations of a secret government program that's hidden the truth and the technology from the world.
There's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the U.S. populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral, and it's totally frightening.
From Roswell to the present day.
We're going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
There are non-prosaic cases, 100% unexplainable. I mean, this is like tangible technical craft they're seeing.
Is this decorated officer a liar?
Why should we believe you?
A fool?
Is it possible that you're deluding yourself?
Or a hero?
I'm a patriot, and I believe the truth to power in this.
Prepare to have your mind blown.
We're talking about the biggest secret in human history.
We are not alone. The UFO whistleblower speaks. For decades, the UFO question has been consigned to the realm of speculation, conspiracy theory, and science fiction.
Can you say E.T.?
E.T. But in recent years, serious people have started taking the subject seriously.
You'll see it come through the top of the screen. There it goes.
Prompted in part by the release of these videos, purporting to show encounters between American naval aviators and what the Pentagon has labelled unidentified aerial or anomalous phenomena. Congress has convened hearings to determine what these UAP are and what threat they might pose.
If UAP do indeed represent a potential threat to our security, then the capabilities, systems, processes, and sources we use to observe, record, study, or analyze these phenomena need to be classified at appropriate levels.
The Department of Defense has established a special team, formerly known as the UAP Task Force, recently renamed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or ARRO, to investigate and identify what are now hundreds of reported sightings. So far, they have not confirmed any of them to constitute proof of alien life. Officially, the government continues to state, we are indeed alone. But now, for the first time, a former member of that official investigative team is speaking out, telling a stunning story that impacts every person on this planet.
And now you're about to meet that man for the very first time in this exclusive television interview. Welcome. Have a seat. Maybe start off telling me your name and who you are.
My name is David Grush. You know, I came from a blue-collar family in Pittsburgh. I didn't have the money for college. Always admired people in uniform. And I've always wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself. You know, 18 years ago, I got an Air Force scholarship for physics. I originally commissioned on active duty in the Air Force. Served 14 years in the Air Force.
I look at this photograph, Dave, and I see a very proud officer.
I was getting promoted to captain when I was deployed.
And you still love your country, don't you?
Absolutely.
After a tour of duty in Afghanistan, Grush moved into the shadowy world of military intelligence.
I was an intel officer for the U.S. for 14 years. My last position, which I left in April of 2023, I co-led the UAP portfolio for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and some of the highest officials within the Department of Defense and Intelligence community used to call on me to advise them on some of the hardest target sets that the country had.
You are one of the most trusted former intelligence officials in the US defense and intelligence establishment.
Yes, I was.
You were trusted with the most intimate secrets
Yes.
And he says the most earth-shattering of those secrets were revealed after 2019, when he was invited to join the UAP task force. You had the security classifications to go anywhere and ask anyone anything.
I had, based on my formal security clearance and multiple polygraphs, I had the ability to be read into any program that I needed. At one point in time, I was extremely highly cleared.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No. I thought it was totally nuts, and I thought at first I was being deceived. It was a ruse. People started confiding in me. They approached me. I have plenty of current and former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me they were a part of a program. They named the program. I've never heard of it. And they told me, based on their oral testimony, and they provided me documents and other proof, that there was in fact a program that the UAP task force was not read into.
You are alleging that the US government has been concealing the existence on this planet of alien life.
I would couch it as non-human intelligence, NHI, like we like to say in our language.
Why do you say that? Why do you say NHI?
I don't want to necessarily denote origin. I don't think we have all the data to say, oh, they're coming from a certain location, and I couch it as somebody who studied physics where maybe they're coming from a different physical dimension as described in quantum mechanics. We know there's extra dimensions due to high energy particle collisions, etc. And there's a theoretical framework to explain that. Yeah.
Just let me cut to the quick though. Mm-hmm. You're saying there is an intelligent species engaging with this planet?
Yes, that's potentially extraterrestrial. Yeah.
I speak for everybody sitting at home. That is a shock.
It was to me, and I had a lot of sleepless nights.
Grush says he's never personally seen non-human intelligence. But he's spoken to enough people directly involved in what he calls the program that he's convinced it's real.
I started out as a non-believer. I came to the problem as a hardcore physics guy, intel officer, so I have a, excuse my language, high factor. I was very methodical, interviewing people who didn't know each other, making sure this wasn't some kind of cover-up of some other program.
He says he pressed to gain direct access to this program, and that's when his trouble started. Grush claims his investigation was stymied, his requests for access rebuffed.
They shut the door in my face. They denied me access to these programs.
He then reported that information to the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Soon after, he says, he endured reprisals and retaliations from above. That's why he's filed this whistleblower complaint, and why he's decided to go public here. You're not being paid for this interview?
No, I'm not.
Why are you doing this?
It's a sense of service, Call me a Boy Scout or whatever. It just when I saw the kind of wrongdoing I did, I don't want to be 60, 70 years old in the future and have that, coulda, shoulda, woulda kind of feeling where I could have made a difference. I do not want to live a life of regret.
You are saying to the human race, for the first time, an official intelligence representative at a high level from the US government is saying publicly, we are not alone.
We're definitely not alone. Absolutely, the data points empirically that we're not alone, yeah.
You've said that the United States has spacecraft, intact craft.
We do.
Do we have bodies? Do we have species of
Well,
non-human?
naturally, when you recover something that's either landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots. And believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds, it's true.
Have you seen spacecraft?
I've seen some interesting photos and I've read some very interesting reports.
But he says the specific documents and photos that would prove his claims are still classified, and he cannot disclose them here.
Let's deal with the issue of your credibility.
Mm-hmm.
Why should we believe you? You're just somebody coming out of nowhere, making claims that we really ultimately can't prove.
Yeah. Well, we provided the proof internally to the Inspector General and the Hill staff, and we went into all the details. I mean, I have the credentials. I was an intelligence officer on the UAP task force.
But let's face it, allegations of aliens and their spacecraft are hard to accept, even coming from a respected insider. Even if you call them NHI and UAP, how could such NHI travel to Earth in the first place and go undetected by the general public? Grush says the craft may not be travelling through space as we understand it.
It is a well-established fact, at least mathematically and based on empirical observation and analysis, that there most likely are physical additional spatial dimensions. You could imagine in 4 and 5D space where what we experience as linear time ends up being a physical dimension in higher dimensional space, where if you were living there, you could translate across what we perceive as a linear flow. So there is a possibility that, and this is a theory here, I'm not saying this is 100% the case, but it could be that this is not necessarily extraterrestrial and it's actually coming from a higher dimensional physical space that might be co-located, right here.
Why do you know it's exotic?
Based on the very specific properties that I was briefed on, isotopic ratios that would have to be engineered for it to be at those levels, but also just extremely strange, heavy atomic metal, high up in the periodic table arrangements that we don't understand, what the emergent properties are, but there's just a very strange mix of elements.
So you're absolutely sure that the materials that these craft are made of are clearly not of this Earth?
Yeah, they're sophisticatedly engineered, certainly not by humans.
And while Grush says the US has gleaned some insight from these materials for military use, so much more could be done if academia and the private sector had access.
It's totally nuts that humanity as a whole, especially the US citizenry as a whole, they're not even benefiting from broad research on this to solve propulsion, energy issues, novel material science that can improve people's quality of life. It's just totally nuts how it's been protected and inhibits progress.
If you're right, if you're telling us the truth, everyone, the entire American public, has been lied to for decades.
Yeah, there's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the US populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral.
Coming up, how long has this been going on?
A lot of the things I was briefed on were very shocking.
The UFO whistleblower makes stunning claims that go back to the famous Roswell incident.
Multiple witnesses say there were bodies recovered from the Roswell craft.
I think you might want to trust some of these witnesses.
So let's start from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You say it's a 90-year cover-up.
Just about, yeah.
90 years?
1933 was the first recovery in Europe, in Magenta, Italy. They recovered a partially intact vehicle.
It's long been known that the regime of dictator Benito Mussolini documented numerous UAP during this time. This internal memo from the Italian Secret Services includes crude drawings of the UAPs.
It's true, it's real.
Yeah, that actually happened. Italian government moved it to a secure air base in Italy for the rest of kind of the fascist regime until 1944, 1945. And, the Pope Pius XII back-channeled that.
So the Vatican was involved?
Yeah, and told the Americans what the Italians had, and we ended up scooping it.
So let me be very clear about this. You're saying that the Catholic Church, the Vatican, they know about the existence of non-human intelligence on this planet?
Certainly.
Grush says shortly after the dawn of the atomic age, another major crash recovery took place. You've probably heard of it.
What can you tell me about the Roswell craft?
Fortunately, those details were not approved for me to talk about right now.
This much we know. In 1947, an object crashed in the New Mexico desert near the town of Roswell. The Air Force recovered material described as metallic and rubbery, though the government changed its story as to what it was, calling it a flying disc at first, then a weather or spy balloon.
It just read ridiculous to me that the US Air Force had changed its story.
Yeah, and they added additional elements over time and tried to conflate additional programs to explain some of the events. Yeah.
It is a matter of public record. Multiple witnesses say there were bodies recovered from the Roswell craft.
I think you might want to trust some of these witnesses.
Why are these things crashing?
Yeah, some are landed, some are crashed, and I think that's an interesting discussion that's come up, as advanced as, we are, as humans, right? Planes crash, cars crash. Just because you're some advanced sentience that has advanced technology doesn't mean some small percentage of your, I'll use the Air Force term like sorties, meet an unfortunate operational conclusion, as we might want to say.
Most people would tell you the Roswell incident has been thoroughly debunked. In fact, the Air Force published this report in 1994 to put the issue to rest once and for all. Grush has read it.
That analysis I did was a total hack job. And even anybody with analytical skills, if you read it, you can deduce that they're conflating multiple situations with crash test dummies and mogul balloons, and they're just saying that the townsfolk who personally witnessed it were totally imagining things. They concocted that whole report just to disinform.
So the reason for the secrecy exactly is what?
Feudalistic dominance, who can have both asymmetric technology for, it seems like, just fueling the war machine.
Grush says that through the 50s and 60s, encounters with the NHI continued, as did the cover-up. One incident in 1967, about which multiple Air Force veterans have gone public, involved UAPs tampering with the nuclear missiles at Malmstrom Air Base in Montana.
They saw a craft, appearing to be intelligently controlled, hovered over a nuclear weapons silo and shut down 10 nuclear ICBM missiles.
It certainly looks like they want to understand how far we've advanced in our nuclear fissile kind of technologies at the very least. I mean, it looks like preparatory probing activity. It might be innocent kind of scientific gathering, could be ISR probing.
Meanwhile, Grush says the crash retrieval program continued, and while he won't reveal where the downed craft are stored, he does say that the people working with the technology have been putting themselves at risk.
A lot of them, were injured looking at some of this stuff. You can imagine the nuclear, radiological, and biological risk to looking at an unknown unknown. And a lot of them have literally suffered physically because of their service.
But as we know, anyone who's come forward claiming non-human intelligence is behind these incidents has been dismissed as delusional or deliberately deceitful.
If you're right, if you're telling us the truth, everyone, the entire American public, has been lied to for decades.
Yeah, there's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the U.S. populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral.
Coming up.
It's 120 knots to the west.
New evidence and perhaps new attitudes in a new age of UAPs.
The American people need and deserve to know more.
Has the US government changed its tune? These are the videos that started it all. Footage captured by naval aviators on military-grade cameras that defied all prosaic explanation. Dave Grush has investigated this one, shot in 2015 off the East Coast by fighter pilots from the USS Theodore Roosevelt. There's an industry of debunkers out there on the web who say, oh, they've got this all wrong, it's a jet exhaust at a distance, and the aircraft's turning. Give me an answer on that.
I had some optical engineering experts look at that, and the Raytheon AT FLIR system, based on the pixel saturation and apparent size. It's certainly something that's not a jet. It might be some kind of natural phenomenon that's quite strange, but it's not as simple as a jet.
He has even stronger opinions about this UAP, now known to history as the Tic Tac, shot in 2004 in the Pacific by aviators off the USS Nimitz. And the Tic Tac?
Truly anomalous, absolutely technical vehicle, physical, and that's absolutely something that we didn't make.
Not of this world.
Most likely, yeah.
The videos were leaked in 2017, then officially released by the Pentagon in 2020. At the time, it seemed the Pentagon may have finally abandoned its obsession with secrecy and decided to do what other countries have been doing for decades: establish a properly funded, publicly accountable team to investigate reports of UAP. Dave Grush was part of that team.
This is a hunt mission for what might somebody be doing in our backyard that we don't know about.
The task force set about investigating these incidents, including more recent events like the odd encounters that took place during naval exercises in 2019 off the coast of San Diego. This video, shot on the USS Omaha and later leaked to documentarian Jeremy Corbell, has received particular attention. It either zooms off so fast you can't see it or it sinks into the ocean, but it seems to drop. What do you know about it?
We could never figure out where it went. We've never figured out the origin of that. Certainly wasn't an easy explanation. It wasn't just some random drone.
Anomalous.
It was truly anomalous.
But Grush says the promised new age of government transparency is a fallacy. For starters, he says the videos that have been released are just the tip of the iceberg.
There are many videos that are totally fair to release through a declassification process, and I find it very concerning from a transparency perspective that all that the department has declassified were those 3 famous videos. There are more concerning videos that left me with a lot of questions, yeah.
He says there are credible witnesses who could testify to Congress about spacecraft, big spacecraft.
A lot of them were very large, yeah. Like a football field kind of size. And I remember interviewing these personnel. I'm like, either these people are lying to me, they're having a psychotic break, or this is some crazy but true stuff that's happening, and I have no good explanation that's prosaic at all for this, because this is not explainable by, swamp gas, St. Elmo's fire, ball lightning, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is like tangible technical craft they're seeing up close and personal in some cases when I interview people.
And at the centre of it all, the crash retrieval program the government has never publicly acknowledged. A program, Grush says, that's included at least one private aerospace company that is storing alien craft. Is that true?
That is how a lot of these relationships are. While I don't want to name the specific companies and government elements, but overall, the government has been the custodian of a lot of this, right? And they'll hand receipt it out to a cleared defense contractor to do some analysis, which I find highly unethical. You have basically a sole source arrangement, and you allow certain private corporate elements to look at this develop a potential insight and then sell it back to the government for profit. And I think that's totally unethical.
The problem you've got is there have been categorical denials from high-level officials in the US government, even presidents, that what you're saying is true.
Unfortunately, some elected officials were not brought in.
Only a few weeks ago, 19th of April, the head of the Pentagon's UAP investigations program, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, told Congress AARO, that's the Pentagon's UFO investigation body, has found no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics.
While a large number of cases in our holdings remain technically unresolved, this is primarily due to a lack of data associated with those cases.
Was that a lie?
Well, I know Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. I've known him for about 8 years. And, I expressed some concerns to Dr. Kirkpatrick about a year ago and told him what I was starting to uncover. And he didn't follow up with me. And he has my phone number. He could have called me. I hope he ultimately does the right thing. He should be able to make the same investigative discoveries I did. It's totally crazy if he doesn't.
So the implication here is that the head of the very body that Congress has ordered to tell the American public the truth about UAPs is possibly misleading the American public. Do you think the American public is being lied to?
Well, they've been lied to over the years, and I'm hoping that the lies stop.
Coming up, it gets even scarier. The UFO whistleblower says the NHIs aren't all friendly. Have human beings been hurt or killed by a non-human intelligence? And guess who they might be working with?
We're in a competition with their adversaries to understand this. And it's a multi-decade Cold War that has been under our nose for so long.
In the movies, the aliens are often portrayed as peaceful, even cuddly. It would be nice if that were true, but Mr. Grush says it's not. The common interpretation from some commentators is that there is a non-human species and it's incredibly benevolently well disposed to the human race.
Yeah, and I think that is the logical fallacy there is because they're advanced, they're kind. We'll never really understand full intent in that because we're not them, whatever them is. Or are, but I think what appears to be malevolent activity has happened. Based on not only nuclear site probing activities, witness testimony, I think at least if we look at it through a humanistic lens, it does appear negative, at least to us.
I've been told that there have been attempts to bring down craft, that we've acted offensively against non-human craft.
There have been instances, and there are certain techniques.
Have human beings been hurt or killed by a non-human intelligence?
While I can't get into the specifics because that would reveal certain U.S. classified operations, I was briefed by a few individuals on the program that there were malevolent events like that.
Now I'm scared. People have just heard you say non-humans may well have murdered human beings.
That seems to be the case at one point, yeah.
And there's more. Grush says the United States is not the only country that's encountered NHI and their technology. He says our geopolitical rivals have their own crash retrieval programs, which they are also secretly exploiting for military purposes.
We're in a competition with their adversaries to understand this, and it's a multi-decade Cold War that has been under our nose for so long, and there is no good way to level the playing field and hold other nation states accountable if they're doing unethical or illicit activity as it relates to this subject. And I think the obtuse secrecy is actually putting us in a very dangerous position where a country might make a breakthrough that say it's an adversary of ours. And it is so destabilizing.
You say there's been a Cold War behind the scenes with Russia and China.
There has been a Cold War with our peer adversaries, yeah.
Why hasn't Russia or China come out and spoken publicly about this?
I think they're in a similar, pickle as us, where it's they understand maybe some of the socioeconomic destabilization factors in their own society.
But if this non-human intelligence is so advanced, and at least some of them are malevolent, why haven't they destroyed us already? Perhaps some fragile yet combustible détente has been reached. Grush has written an internal document about his discoveries that refers to agreements that risk putting our future in jeopardy. And it's quite clear that you're talking about agreements between America and non-human intelligences. Have we made agreements with non-human intelligences?
That's the kind of information I really hope national leadership is able to get to the bottom of.
I need to pin you down on this. Are there agreements between non-human intelligences and the American government?
I think that's a question that I would like to know all the details of as well.
If this is true, if the stakes are so high, if the fate of the human race is at stake, perhaps it's no surprise to hear Grush say the US government will do anything to keep these secrets safe. Can I put it to you that crimes must have been committed?
At the very least, I saw substantiative evidence that white-collar crime was committed.
Have people been killed to protect this secret?
Based on the people I talked to, that was an ongoing concern. Yeah, unfortunately, I've heard some really un-American things I don't want to repeat right now.
So you have a strong suspicion that people have been murdered to protect the secret?
Over the years, yeah.
Coming up, a reality check. Is it possible that you're deluding yourself? It's time to put our whistleblower's credibility to the test. Everybody watching this right now is looking at your face. They're going, is this guy for real? Let's talk about what Dave Grush doesn't have. He doesn't have smoking gun documents or photos. He doesn't have official confirmation of his claims. He's just a guy talking on camera, and a lot of his answers to our most pointed questions sound like this. Can you comment?
Unfortunately, I cannot.
So who is this guy really?
I don't want fame or fortune. I'm just here to provide public leadership on an issue that I uncovered, and I thought it was totally outrageous.
News Nation has confirmed through multiple sources that Dave Grush is who he says he is, an Air Force veteran from Pittsburgh who worked in military intelligence and was part of the UAP task force. Maybe he's just a confident, well-spoken, ex-military intelligence officer who just happens to have lost his mind. Do you have any kind of mental illness?
No.
Have you ever had a psychosis, a delusion?
No.
Is there anything in your medical history that might be capable of being interpreted as a reason why you might be confabulating, making things up?
No, I'm not a disgruntled employee. I resigned on my own accord because I thought altruistically it's more appropriate to show thought leadership on the outside on this now, because I hit an impasse within the government to try to right this wrong.
So I've got to be blunt about this. Yeah. You're not making this up. This is not a lie.
No, absolutely not.
Because everybody watching this right now is looking at your face. They're going, is this guy for real?
I am for real. And I'm sitting here at great personal risk and obvious professional risk by talking to you today.
You've told us that we really are not alone. Even though you believe what you say is true, you haven't been fed disinformation. It's a common thing in intelligence for governments to mislead.
Yeah, I was very sensitive to that fact. Was this some kind of ruse against me? Am I being used in any kind of way? And I took about 4 years being very methodical before I filed my whistleblower complaint to be absolutely certain of these basic facts.
So take me through the process of how you convinced yourself that this is real.
Well, based on the credential people that came to me, some of these subjects provided me sensitive foreign intelligence to read, sensitive program documents and photographs to evaluate, and then described in very specific detail how all this worked. And they were telling me the exact, extremely specific details that it all checked out. Yeah.
You know, the thing I have trouble with, it's the fact that my experience as a journalist is it's very hard for governments to keep secrets. Most things leak. Your government leaks like a sieve. Why hasn't this leaked?
Well, I've certainly been the recipient of a lot of U.S. government secrets, and I can tell you they've never seen the light of day. That's for sure. And I guess ostensibly this has leaked like a sieve for decades, but it was a very sophisticated disinformation campaign where they have allowed some of the truth to come out through some of their trade crafts, but they've disenfranchised people, they've stigmatized it, they made it like this total wacky thing to talk about. So anybody who may come forward with that kind of information is looked like a total tinfoil hat guy, because it's a perfect amalgamation of disinformation to just make it look crazy.
The best reason to believe Dave Grush may be this document. Remember that whistleblower complaint he filed? It would seem it hasn't fallen on deaf ears. So the Inspector General of the Intelligence Services of the United States has the information you've got.
Yes.
And more importantly, the Inspector General made a determination about the credibility of your complaint.
They found, after interviewing myself and the subjects, and other subjects that I'm not even cognizant on who they were, they found my complaint urgent and credible for the intelligence committees.
The word credible is important, you
Yes.
appreciate. So an official investigatory body of the United States government has determined that your allegations are credible.
Correct.
Coming up, if it is true, then what? What are we going to do if the biggest secret on the planet is now out in the open? And what are they going to do? How will the non-human intelligence react?
There's a whole army of people that want change. I am one of tens, if not hundreds, of individuals within the government on these programs that would like a change.
What kind of change does David Grush want? As he's said here tonight, he wants the NHI technology to be shared so the rest of the world can benefit from it.
And I use nuclear weapons or nuclear physics as an example. It's an acknowledged program. We have nuclear weapons. You don't get to know the designs, but nuclear physics holistically is unclassified. Academia studies it. And why would you suppress basic astrophysics, astrobiology, other hard and soft sciences broadly? It's totally nuts.
Grush has left the government. He wasn't part of ARO during the most recent congressional hearings when still more UAP were revealed, including this one captured by a drone in the Middle East in 2022.
There it goes.
His whistleblower case will take months to conclude. In the meantime, he says he's starting a scientific foundation. And he's willing to speak to anyone in Washington who has the clearance and the desire to hear the classified information he could not share here.
I make myself available to Secretary Austin, DNI Haynes, who was a recipient of my complaints. I'm happy to further brief elected officials on the specific ecosystem of secrecy down to the fine details.
Whoever they are. How will the non-human intelligence react to the revelation that human beings now know
they're here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the non-human intelligences have been around for a while, at least multiple decades in modern history, and they've allowed ourselves to annihilate ourselves, genocide, war, famine, etc. So at the very least, I think they're kind of neutral on what humans decide to do with their free will.
And as for how we, the human race, will react to his story, here Grush evinces that quintessentially human characteristic, optimism.
I don't have this utopian ideology that this is going to, solve world problems, stop war entirely. But all I want is a moment of pause and to see if the subject unites us, as we've obviously become more divided over the last couple of decades.
Because, if anything else, what you're revealing may mean we all start thinking of ourselves not as American, Australian, Russian, Chinese, but as human.
Human family, I think that's totally the right term, yeah.
It was just an ordinary day in America. Betty, a social worker, and Barney, a U.S. postal employee, were driving home after their honeymoon in Niagara Falls. A trip, as their niece Kathleen explains, they would never forget.
Betty and Barney had a wonderful time in Niagara Falls. They spent the following afternoon in Montreal. They thought about spending the night downtown, but they heard that there was a hurricane whirling up the coast. And they wanted to drive through the night if they could. I was 13 years old, and I had arrived home from school in the afternoon. My mother was on the phone with my Aunt Betty, and I heard my mother's side of the conversation. When my mother hung up the phone, she told me that Betty and Barney had seen a flying saucer up close the night before. They were concerned that they might have been contaminated. I was in shock. I thought this was very, very strange.
Hello, which one have I got on the line, or have I got your both?
You have us both on.
Oh, how wonderful. Hello, that's you, Barney?
Yes, that's correct.
And Betty, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Betty?
This is a 1966 radio interview with Betty and Barney, in their own words.
Now, as I understand it, we have to go back to 1961 to start this whole incident, don't we?
Yes, that's right. September 19th, 1961.
The night that changed their lives forever.
When we, traveling south on Route 3, arrived in an area called Lancaster, New Hampshire, Betty called my attention to an object or a star that she had been watching.
As I was watching, this star seemed to be getting larger and brighter. And as we rode along, I kept watching it, and then all of a sudden, I noticed that it had started to move. And we decided to stop, get out of the couch, and take a look at it.
I told her that it was probably a satellite. Nothing to get alarmed about.
Betty had never seen a satellite before. She knew that her father was very interested in satellites, and so Betty wondered, could this be a satellite? But then she thought, no, it's not behaving like a satellite.
She then passed the binoculars to me and said, well, you must really look at this satellite because it's not behaving as we would expect a satellite to behave like.
It's clear at this point this was not a satellite. It does a circle.
it seems to fly away to the west and then come back directly towards them.
Barney is coming up with the other explanations. Maybe it's a passenger jet. Maybe it's a military helicopter. He's got all these explanations because that's how he thinks.
And surprisingly, this, what I thought was a satellite, began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed. Well, this caused me to become quite alarmed. And I told my wife, well, apparently it is not a satellite, it must be a passenger plane, and they obviously are looking at us, and I felt uncomfortable to see this, what I thought was a plane, come in our direction. So I returned to the car, and so did she, and we drove down the highway.
Privately, he knew that this was unusual, but he said to Betty, "Oh, it's just a Piper Cub or a commercial airliner. Don't even think about that. And let's get home."
But then, as they continue driving south, Betty notices the aircraft appears to be stalking them.
Betty said to Barney, "It's coming closer, Barney." As they looked at it, it flew in a zigzag pattern, and then it appeared to bounce back and forth in the sky like a ping pong ball.
Barney starts to panic.
Well, from this point, I was getting quite frightened because of this, and I thought it must have been military pilots. They could obviously see us on the ground with the lights of the car on. I thought they were playing a game with us out there.
Up until now, the sighting had been at quite a distance. But now that they've driven down the road several miles and they look up and it's still there, fear starts to settle in. It knows that we're here. They're thinking this has a particular interest in us. There's no other cars on the highway, and this light is getting brighter and it's getting closer.
They followed us for approximately 30 miles, and then in an area called Indian Head, it left the top of the mountain, came out over the highway, and stopped midair on the highway right in front of us.
Story. A large, brightly coloured object was seen travelling very fast above Zimbabwe, Zambia, and South Africa.
I thought it was an alien, and he had big eyes.
Several planes saw it. The experts are baffled. Rua, Ariel School, 19th September 94, 12:12 local time. Could you tell me what you saw on Friday?
Well, it looked like it was like glinting in the trees. Like it looked like roundabout like a disc, like a round.
Are you sure it wasn't a Harrier jump jet or something that the Zimbabwe Air Force
It was like
have got?
in a disc. Kind of like that.
I saw something silver on the ground amongst the trees, and a person in black.
They had big black eyes. That's all I saw. I saw a glimpse. They kind of turned around and stared and then went back into a kind of like ship.
I saw this silver thing in amongst this clump of trees with this one thing sitting on the side and another thing sort of like running up and down the top.
What does he look like?
His face was like this and his eyes were down here.
Mr. Mackey, you're headmaster of Ariel School. Tell me, what do you think of all this?
I feel sure that the children feel that they did see something. We asked them to draw pictures of what they saw on Friday, and after looking at those, I definitely feel that they did see something.
What do you think that was?
I agree that it could be something that we are not common with. But to actually say that it was a UFO, I would be reluctant to make a decision like that.
What did you see?
I just saw a glow over my chicken run, a very orange glow.
It was a helicopter or
No,
what?
it was just a big round ball.
Can you just tell us what happened the other night at Kriba?
We suddenly looked up and we saw this thing coming over the top of the hill. As it sort of came abreast of us, it suddenly changed from this glow to let's say 2 big red orange balls. Again, first thought was an Airbus 300 with the 2 engines. But then one thing we noticed about it was the lack of sound. In total, I would say about 14 people saw this, in our group anyway.
They did tell me from London this could be the biggest story of the 20th century.
As I said to Tim yesterday, I mean, I do believe the children saw something.
Saw a door.
What equipment have you brought with you?
Well, Gunther is a highly technical chap, and he's made his own Geiger counter, his own metal detector. We're going to check it out and see if there's any radioactivity there.
Cynthia, what are your impressions after this morning's little expedition?
Well, I certainly believe the children. I've come across a similar type of thing in Broadhaven in Wales, 1979, and the British didn't believe it, although I went down 3 times, and it's very similar to the whole incident here.
There was a large silver disc-shaped object was embedded in the side of the ridgeline, and there was debris and wreckage and stuff strewn about the area, but mainly this thing was intact. I would estimate its size from an adult perspective to be something like 35 feet in diameter. I've heard other people who were there say they thought it was like 50 feet, but as an adult I would say about 35 feet in diameter, quite large. When we got up to it, there were 4 bodies there, not human. There was 2 of them who were obviously dead. One of them was obviously very badly injured, and one of them that apparently suffered no ill effects, or didn't appear to be injured, and was ambulatory, was mobile, and was just sitting there next to the one that was still alive that appeared to be.
Were they right next to the vehicle?
Right next to it, right under the edge of it. And this craft had apparently come in from the east, bounced off one ridge line, went plowing through this arroyo area, and then crashed into the ridge line and embedded itself. And they were sitting back under the edge. It was kind of tilted up like this, and they were sitting back under the edge here. And I'm assuming that this one creature that was all right had laid this material on the ground, but it looked like unrolled tinfoil that these other 3 creatures were laying on, like it was trying to, like you do a person that's shocked and put them on a blanket, kind of a thing. And apparently it had some boxes there around it, and had apparently been trying to give first aid or help these other creatures when we first got there. And as we approached, the creature drew back like this, like it was in fear of us, like we were going to hurt it. And it wasn't very long, you know, trying to communicate with it, the adults were. It seemed to calm down and just sat there and kind of looked back and forth, watching them, apparently trying to figure out what was going on. Like,
what did it look like a little bit more?
These creatures, all of them were about 4 foot tall, 4.5 feet tall. They had very large heads that were shaped larger on the top, and they kind of tapered down. Not to a real sharp point, but just tapered down where they were thin. And they had very large, oval-shaped or almond-shaped, I guess you could say, black eyes. They were so shiny, they had almost a bluish tint to them when the light reflected off of them. Their skin coloration, I think the best way I could describe that is kind of a bluish tinted milky white. It looked like someone in shock. And the ones that were laying on the ground were really looked more that way, more blue.
How about ears, nose, mouth?
No, there was no visible ears on the creatures, except like if you was just to cover your ear like this, to where there was just a rise there and then a hole, without your earlobe and the rest of the ear there.
How about nose?
It was the nose was very, very small, almost imperceptible, and just like two holes straight in, and the lips were just a straight line. It was like a cut, and you couldn't see any visible lips like we have. It was just a slit, and
What
they
hair
never
color?
made a sound. Pardon?
What hair color?
There was no hair. They were completely bald.
And no sounds?
I never heard a sound of one, not out of any of the creatures, including the one that was.
Did you see fingers?
Yeah, they had fingers like this. They didn't have a little finger. They just had the thumb, had 3 extra digits, except the center digit was longer, and the other 2 were about the same size. They were very long and slender. They looked very delicate, and I've made the statement before, and I'll make it again. I think they would have made excellent violinists because of the structure of their hands. They were wearing one-piece suits. All of them were dressed exactly the same, and it was sort of a real shiny, silverish gray color.
No zippers, buttons?
No, I saw no zippers, no buttons.
You saw that there were aliens there. Would you tell us?
Yeah.
You would. And that he didn't find anything.
Well, I'm gonna do it again.
Think of how all the differences among people on Earth would seem small if we felt threatened by a space invader. That's the whole.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
It was the darndest thing I've ever seen. It was big, it changed colors, and it was about the size of the moon. We watched it for 10 minutes, but none of us could figure out what it was. One thing's for sure, I'll never make fun of people who say they've seen unidentified flying objects in the sky. If I become president, I'll make every piece of information this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and the scientists. I'm convinced that UFOs exist because I've seen one.
I did.
Wow.
Well, I didn't. And then there's also Area 51. You remember there was a great sci-fi movie where there was an alien kept deep under the ground in Area 51? So first I had people go look at the records on Area 51 to make sure there was no alien down there. And people thought that because everybody who works there has to stop about an hour away and put on special clothing and then drive in and out. And that's because a lot of our stealth technology is made there. We know that now. But there are no aliens there. So then when the Roswell thing came up, I knew we'd get, gazillions of letters. So I had all the Roswell papers reviewed, everything.
If you saw that there were aliens there, would you tell us?
Yeah.
You would give me a hint that there are aliens.
No, I'm trying to tell you I don't know. Oh. But if we were visited someday, I wouldn't be surprised. I just hope that it's not like Independence Day.
Yeah, right.
That it's a conflict.
Well, now we have friendly
Maybe the only way to unite this incredibly divided world of ours. They're out there. We better think of how all the differences among people on Earth would seem small if we felt threatened by a space invader. That's the whole theory of independence.
You're right.
Everybody gets together and makes nice and,
You would
flying saucers. You've had some in Michigan in the past week. Do you really believe in flying saucers? You've called for a congressional investigation. Dave, we've had several incidents in Michigan in the last week. Incidents that many reliable, good citizens felt were sufficient to justify some action by our government, and not the kind of flippant answer that was given by the Air Force where they passed it off as a swamp gas. The Congress should investigate the rash of reported sightings of unidentified flying objects in southern Michigan and other parts of the
schoolyard with about 20 other men, and we saw a bright light appear in the distant western skies, and it got closer and closer, and when it was just above the treetops, it changed color, and it stayed there for a while, and then it disappeared into the distance. And none of us...
Well, I was the district governor of 56 Lions clubs in southwest Georgia, and I had to visit all the Lions clubs and make a speech. And I was outside a school lunchroom one night, right before sundown. It was getting dark, and we were getting ready to eat supper. And I and about 25 men were standing around, and all of a sudden in the western sky we saw a strange light coming toward us, a round light, and it got closer and closer, and right above the pine trees it stopped, and then it began to change colors from blue to red to white, and then it stayed there for a while. We were all aghast, we didn't know what it was, and then it just disappeared into the west. That was the end of it. So it was a genuine UFO in that it was an unidentified flying object, but I have never thought and still don't think that it's possible for, creatures from Mars to come here and visit us and go back home.
Yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military. There's always things like that going on. Flying saucers, and they've had other things, if I'm not mistaken.
Знаете, абсолютно все. Ну вот, например, прилетали на Землю инопланетяне, представлены зеленые человечки.
Значит, рассказываю вам первый и последний раз. Вместе с передачей чемодана с ядерными кодами президенту страны приносят специальную папку. На ней написано «Совершенно секретно». И она целиком и полностью посвящена пришельцам, которые посетили нашу планету. Одновременно предоставляется доклад абсолютно закрытой спецслужбы, которая занимается контролем пришельцев на территории нашей страны. Значит, две эти папки передаются вместе с ядерным чемоданом. После прекращения полномочий, соответственно, эти папки передаются новому президенту. Сколько их среди нас, рассказывать не буду, потому что это может вызвать панику.
President Reagan suddenly said to me, what would you do if the United States were attacked by someone from outer space? Would you help us? I said, no doubt about it. He said, we too.
When you were in office, and I don't know when this happened or if it happened, did you go through the secret files, the UFO document? That would be the first thing I did.
It's funny. My daughters asked the very same question.
They did?
Yeah.
Would you be allowed to tell your daughters what was in those files?
No.
You would not?
No.
Now that you're out of office, you can do anything you want, right?
True, yeah. But I'm not telling you.
Telling me what? Are you not telling me that you looked at them?
I'm not telling you nothing.
Secrets that you know that you can't share with people?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are. And you never write about them?
No.
Maybe at a time in your life that you're like, oh, I'm 90, I'm going to do it.
No.
No, nothing. What if you were to get like a little loopy, you get old and
start drinking again?
Start, yeah.
3 astronauts of Apollo 11 who went to the moon back in 1969 all said that they believe there is life beyond Earth. Do you agree?
I don't know. So this is something I feel like if I was the president, and it's unlikely that that is ever going to happen.
You never know.
If I was the president,
it was unlikely that I was going to be president.
The moment I was inaugurated, my hand would it'd still be hot from touching the Bible, and I would immediately race to wherever they have the files about Area 51 and the UFOs, and I go through everything to find out what happened.
Right.
Did you do that?
That's why you will not be president. Because that's the first thing that you would do. The aliens won't let it happen. You reveal all their secrets. They exercise strict control over us.
Now, you know, there are a lot of people that are going to examine your facial expressions here, every twitch, everything, and say, and of course, so did you look? Did you see? Did you explore?
I can't reveal anything.
Oh, really? Because President Clinton said he did go right in, and he did check, and there was nothing.
Well, you know, that's what we're instructed to say.
That space is a warfighting domain, just like the land, air, and sea. We may even have a space force developed.
So, is there really a book of secrets?
That's a secret.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of secrets would you want to know? What would be in the Book of Secrets?
If aliens are real.
Ah.
Well, what do you think?
Well, after watching this TV show, I think aliens are probably real.
Golly. Okay. Well.
Which TV show was that?
I think it's called, like, America's Book of Secrets.
There you go.
Somebody spilled the secrets already.
I thought that was classified.
It's a Book of Secrets, and yet there's a TV show.
Yeah, well, the truth is, Macy, we haven't actually made direct contact with aliens. Aliens, there's some things I just can't tell you on air. But what is true, and I'm actually being serious here, is that there's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory.
UFOs? Any UFOs? Did you ask about that?
Certainly asked about it.
And?
Can't tell you. Sorry.
Okay. All right, I'll take that as a yes. Because if there were none,
Why
you'd say
not?
there was none, right? You just played your hand. I thought you were a poker player.
The truth is that we've never proved one, but there are things flying around up there that we haven't fully identified yet. The probability is that there's something you would call life somewhere else.
Navy pilots seeing lots and lots of UFOs. Have you been briefed on that? What do you make of it?
I have. I think it's probably. I want them to think whatever they think. They do say. I mean, I've seen, and I've read, and I've heard, and I did have one very brief meeting on it. But people are saying they're seeing UFOs. Do I believe it? Not particularly.
Do you think you'd know if there were evidence of extraterrestrials?
Well, I think our great pilots would know. And some of them really see things that are a little bit different than in the past. So we're going to see. But
would you ever open up Roswell and let us know what's really going on there?
So many people ask me that question.
I know, it sounds almost ridiculous, but it's actually the real question I want to know.
It sounds like a cute question, but it's actually, there are millions and millions of people that want to go there, that want to see it. I won't talk to you about what I know about it, but it's very interesting. But Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
So you're saying you may declassify?
Oh.
You'll take it?
Well, I'll have to think about that one, right?
President Obama says that there is footage and records of objects in the skies, these unidentified aerial phenomenon, and he says we don't know exactly what they are. What do you think that it is?
I would ask him again. Thank you.
Decades ago, visitors from other planets warned us about where we were headed and offered to help. But instead, we, or at least some of us, interpreted their visits as a threat and decided to shoot first and ask questions after. The inevitable result was that some of our planes were lost, but how many were due to retaliation and how many were as a result of our own stupidity is a moot point. Wilbert Smith, one of the first Canadians to take an active interest in the subject of UFOs, asked the visitors about the accidental destruction of our aircraft by flying into the vicinity of a flying saucer. The response, and this is Wilbur's words, we were informed that although a few of our aircraft had come to an unfortunate end by what they considered the colossal stupidity of our pilots, They were now taking corrective measures to avoid our aircraft. I asked them, and this is still Smith, I asked them what happened, and they said, well, the fields around the saucers, in order to hold them up, in order to produce the gravity differential, the time field differentials which were necessary to operate the ship, these sometimes produced field combinations which reduced the strength of materials to the point where they were no longer strong enough to carry the loads that the materials were expected to carry. Now, as we know, aircraft, particularly the military type, are built with a rather small factor of safety. And in these regions of reduced binding, the materials are no longer strong enough to carry the load, and the craft simply comes apart. When I read that, I was reminded of the late, great soprano Lily Pons, who used to smash crystal goblets with her high C. She would direct the sound at them, and something in the sound waves would change the structure of the glass, and it would fly apart. Well, this didn't satisfy our military chiefs, who must have thought that it was more important to secure American nuclear superiority, even though using it would result in the annihilation of us all, than to take the hint and start moving the planet back from the brink of global disaster. They, the military, must have been and still are so paranoid that they feel it necessary to use the visitors' technology to fight them off, rather than welcome them as partners in development, though they may have seconded a few renegades to assist them in what can best be viewed as diabolical developments. Stephen has said that talking about UFOs is passé, and that we should be talking or limiting our talk to exopolitics. Well, Stephen, I agree with you in theory, but in reality we have a problem when official U.S. policy insists that UFOs don't exist. The veil of secrecy must be lifted, and it has to be lifted now, before it is too late. It is ironic that the U.S. would begin a devastating war, allegedly in search of weapons of mass destruction, when the most worrisome developments in this field are occurring in your own backyard. It is ironic that the U.S. should be fighting monstrously expensive wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, allegedly to bring democracy to those two countries, when it itself can no longer legitimately claim to be called a democracy, when trillions, and I mean thousands of billions of dollars, have been spent on projects about which both the Congress and the Commander-in-Chief have been kept deliberately in the dark. How much has been accomplished in 60 years of feverish activity by some of the most educated minds in the United States? Has America developed flying saucers that are visually indistinguishable from the visitors, as alleged? And if so, what do they propose to do with them? Even more critical, what progress has been made in the development of clean energy sources that could conceivably replace fossil fuels and save the planet from becoming a veritable wasteland? Well, who has the answers? Someone does, but apparently they aren't telling either secretaries of defense or presidents, because they don't have, quote, a need to know. In a story told by Dr. Stephen Greer, President Clinton was asked a question by White House reporter Sarah McClendon about why he didn't do something about disclosure. And Clinton replied, "Sarah, there's a government inside the government, and I don't control it." Excuse me, doesn't the commander-in-chief and the person who allegedly has their finger on the nuclear trigger have a right to know what his subordinates are doing? The people of the United States who have paid the bills have the right to know. The people of the world demand to know because it is our descendants too whose lives are in mortal danger. It is time for the people of the United States to launch a new war against the evil of lies, deceit, and darkness, and go all out to win the victory of truth and transparency and light. Thank you.
Well, this was one ordinary day. I was waiting for my husband to come home from work, and my two sons went to Seifert to school, and I was getting changed, and I heard this terrific noise. It was just like a giant cauldron of water being poured onto a fire, a shh sort of noise, you know. And the first reaction was, oh, the children. I thought maybe a plane was crashing or something like that. And I slipped my jumper on and went outside to find my two sons lying flat on the ground in the garden in front of the house, shouting, "Mummy, Mummy, there's a flying saucer." Well, naturally, I just said, "Come on, don't be stupid. Come in the house." But felt sort of a strange sensation. Wended my way up the side of the house to where we had a pump where we used to get all our water from, and automatically looked up to see this, all I can describe, this huge Mexican hat. It was stationary, this thing, and it was bright silver in colour, and it had a dome. A dome. It was tilted to sort of, I could see the occupants in it.
You saw people in it?
I saw people in it. There were two people in there. These people were beautiful people. That's the only way I can describe them. They had long golden hair, like a page boy bob, just like the old kings. You used to see photographs of the old kings. And the colour of the hair was golden. Now, I was really...
What were they dressed in?
They had a sort of a polo neck jumper affair, like a ski top suit, in pale blue. Now, these people weren't sat behind, one behind the other. They were sat together, but this, whatever it was tilted so that I could see them and they could see me.
Were you looking at them through windows, through portholes? Or
no, not portholes. It was just sort of like a cockpit, I suppose. But had this perspex or glass or whatever it was. They could see me anyway, and I could see them. And they had beautiful faces. I shall never forget their faces as long as I live. Their foreheads seemed to be a bit larger than, you know, the bottom of their faces as normal people you would expect to see. But maybe this was just whatever they had round their heads, which was like a transparent fishbowl. And they just looked. And I was absolutely paralytic with fear. I couldn't move, although my mind was ticking over. And they looked so sympathetic that I was just mesmerized.
One November evening last year, Mrs. Bowles and a friend of the family, Mr. Pratt, were driving out of Winchester when they saw a light in the sky, a light seen by many other people that night.
This is where we see the large orange light.
That's right, yes, we did. Yes, on their left.
On the left here.
Yes. And
then it disappeared, and I am coming up to it now. It appeared again here. But it started hovering down below the back of these trees and the hedges here.
We came on down the road for another quarter of a mile, maybe a bit more. We turned sharp left to come into Chilcombe Lane. It's a bad bend, isn't it? Going down this lane, and we were doing about 20 mile an hour, maybe 20, 25 mile an hour. Done about 70 yards down, all of a sudden this car suddenly went crazy. It just leapt off the road to the right, and the engine started to rev. We hit the grass verge, which is a very wide grass verge, about 15 yards wide, and we were heading towards a high edge. So I grabbed the steering wheel as Mrs. Bowles was fighting with it, and suddenly the car straightened itself. We came down the grass verge for about 10 to 15 yards, and we came to a stop. And it was though we'd hit an invisible barrier, which it gave, because it didn't throw me forward into the seat, but it gave, and then brought us back to our normal stopping position.
That was when we see...
Well, then sorry, yes?
That was when we see, what I shall say, a cigar-shaped object hovering in front of us. Inside were 3 figures.
Yes, they had like a cockpit in the cabin was in the front of the cigar-shaped thing, and was lit up, but not glowingly lit up. It was a very easy light to look at.
It was hovering. It had either steam or vapor coming out like gas jets. Then I see one of these figures get out of this thing, this object, and it started walking across towards me.
Yes, it was.
Now, as it was walking across towards me, I heard a whistle.
Which I didn't hear.
It's like a whistling kettle starting to whistle. Now, he had on like a boiler suit, but it was with a polar neck collar. He had a seam down on his right-hand side. As he walked across, he come to my window. He put his arm on the roof of my car and looked in. Now, he was a tall man, roughly 6'1", 6'2". He had pink eyes, which were very piercing. He had sideboards and a beard, which met. He looked in at me, then he looked at Ted. After looking at Ted, he looked at my dashboard. And as he was looking at the dashboard, my car engine started up. Now, the car ignition keys was turned off. And as the engine started up of my car, my headlights were 4 times powerful than what they normally are. It was just like a glow of white. I see a movement of this figure. Oh, by the way, I grabbed Ted. And I said, no, Ted, don't get out, because he wanted to get out. And I just literally wrapped my body around Ted. And then I opened one eye, because I'd had my eyes shut. And I opened one eye and I said, look out, Ted, he's going round the back to you. I see a movement, thinking he was going round the right, all the way round my car. Ted looked over his left-hand shoulder to have a look around to see if he was coming round. And my words were, don't open the door, Ted, don't open the door. But while Ted was looking round and me huddled to him with my eyes closed, the figure disappeared with the object. After it gone, after a few seconds, which seemed hours to us, Ted said, well, let's go. Oh, he asked me if he could drive, and I said, not likely. It only meant because it meant me getting out of my car. I put it in first and started off, but we could not move. It was as though as we were still hitting an invisible barrier. Well, I put her back in neutral and waited for a few seconds, and then I started off again. And we went off perfectly normal in the car.